We will now light our chalice, and as we do so, we will summon the elements of the divinity here so that they can lend us their talents for our service here today. We call the powers of the East, element of air, heralds of intellect and intuition. We ask you to lend us your wisdom. Hail and welcome. We call the powers of the South, elements of fire, heralds of passion and power. We ask you to lend us your determination. Hail and welcome. We call the powers of the West, element of water, heralds of emotion and empathy. We ask you to lend us your compassion. Hail and welcome. We call the powers of the North, element of earth, heralds of patience and prosperity. We ask you to lend us your stability. Hail and welcome. We call the Spirit. A single flame can warm a room. A single word can calm a fear. A single smile can lift a heart. A single touch can heal a wound. As the light replaces the darkness, let us rejoice together in his rebirth. Hail and welcome. Our opening words today come from Evan Carvel Ziemer. If we lived in another climate, our souls might speak other languages. We might speak oasis or permafrost, dry season or monsoon, but our souls speak spring. Our souls speak green shoots pushing through last year's leaves. Our souls speak flower buds stretching to the sun. Our souls speak mud puddles and nest building, damp earth and warm castings, tiny green leaves and frog choruses. We speak spring because spring sings in us. We gather to nurture our faith in our own growing, our own courage to push through, our own blossoming in beauty, our own small part in the spring of this world.
Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Demeter, Kali, Inanna. 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 Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And blessed Ostara to you all. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the holiday, Ostara celebrates the arrival of spring and all of her power. The origins of the holiday, the goddess behind the holiday, come from Germanic mythology and the goddess of dawn and spring named Eoster. First recorded by the historical scholar Bede in the 8th century, and later incorporated into the stories of the brothers Grimm as they gathered tales of folklore a millennium later, the myth of Eoster may feel familiar even if you haven't heard it before. Eoster is a goddess of light, both of the growing day and the growing year. And she arrives each year to a world not yet free of winter's icy grasp. Before her, the trees are still gray and chilled. the ground still laced with frost. But where she walks, leaves begin to bud. The forest turns to a speckled green, and flowers begin to bloom, forming a rich carpet of color that will soon blanket the earth. As the story goes, one spring long ago, during one such early spring day, the goddess Ostara walked, bringing with her the turning of the seasons. Along the way, Ostara came across a bird injured on the ground. It had arrived too early, ahead of the warmth of spring, and had been caught in the last storms of winter. It lay dying before the goddess, its wings frozen helplessly to the earth. Moved by the creature's plight, Ostara reached down and freed the frozen bird with a gentle brush of warm flames, and then, with a careful twist of her hands, she transformed it into a rabbit. Safe now in a sturdier, warmer form, the new rabbit hopped off. But being as it had once been a bird, the rabbit would still lay eggs. And they were beautiful eggs with bright colors and delicate patterns. And the rabbit, grateful to the goddess that had rescued her, returned to Ostara and offered the vibrant eggs to the goddess of spring and dedicated itself to her. So if you were wondering where so much of the imagery of Easter comes from, but the holiday we celebrate today is Ostara, named after the goddess. It is a celebration of the vernal equinox, which just happened this last Friday, and it is the official beginning of spring in the solar calendar. The vernal equinox itself is a major astrological event. It is one of 2 days a year when day and night are perfectly balanced, the powers of light and darkness evenly matched over the world. Since the equinox just the other day, the balance of power has shifted. The days will become longer as we head into summer. And now the world stands in favor of the power of light. But there's another element at play in spring, if you were paying attention to that little story. It's closely aligned with light, however, and that element is fire. And today, we're going to talk about that. Now, I realize that most of the people here aren't neo-pagans, and long philosophical ramblings about the mystical qualities of elements or various long-forgotten deities aren't going to do much for the spiritual path. But as Unitarian Universalists, our seventh principle encompasses a respect for nature and the intricate web of life that we all have a place in. And there are a number of powerful lessons that can be learned from nature, especially now in spring and with the element of fire. Fire is a powerful force, literal energy made physical. It gives off light. It embodies passion and willpower. And most importantly for spring, as we see in the story, it is an element of transformation. We can see the power of fire in the warming sunlight, the lengthening days, and every explosion of life this season as seeds burst into shoots, buds bloom into flowers, and everything green reaches its limbs to the heavens. And a great deal of nature, particularly here in the US, relies on the element of fire to survive. It may seem an ironic twist of fate. Fire in nature is often seen as destructive, an all-consuming force that leaves nothing alive in its wake. But that is an attitude that has actually caused immeasurable harm, or measurable. depending on how many numbers you feel like counting. So today, rather than a philosophical tangent, we're going to be doing a bit of a science lesson. And if it happens to have some tidbits of wisdom for other aspects of life, all the better. As I said, today I want to talk about fire, and most specifically, I want to talk about fire ecologies. Now, a fire ecology is any natural ecosystem where the element of fire plays a vital role in maintaining the balance of life within that system. Fire can increase the base temperature of the soil, especially in spring. It can break organic matter into smaller particles, more easily absorbed back into the environment. Fire burns away dry scrub material, opening up valuable land area and sunlight for new growth, vital both for the regeneration of forests and scrublands, but also for animals coming back from winter to eat. Some species of plants have evolved alongside regular fire events and only produce seeds or shoots after a burn. Such ecosystems are quite prevalent all over the United States. From the most infamous chaparral shrublands of California, north to the boreal forests and tundra of Alaska, down to the various forests of Colorado and the Rockies, over to the pine forests of the East Coast, and down to the marsh grasslands of Florida, my own home state, and then back again across the southern coastlines up to the prairies of the Midwest. All of them fire ecologies. Our own state of Texas straddles both of the last two, coastal marshes and prairies. And all of these ecosystems burn naturally at regular intervals, with fire breaking out anywhere from once every few decades to as frequently as every few years. And each time fire sweeps across the landscape, that scar of charcoal and ash left to blacken the land. But in the darkness of that revitalized soil, new green life inevitably sprouts. Fire ecologies take one of the most turbulent of natural forces and turn its power from destruction to creation. It's a powerful lesson. But another powerful lesson, perhaps more poignant, and the one I want you to ponder today, is what happens when those ecosystems don't burn. When fire is taken away. Now, indigenous people of the Americas knew how important fire was to the land. While they were curating the continent into vast food forests over generations, fire was a tool that they used to help build the abundance our nation would eventually become so well known for. Native tribes would, alongside natural fires, use their own carefully managed burns to make sure forests had room to regrow and animals would have fresh food to eat. It would also give them space to plant the various fruit and nut-bearing trees that made our continent feel like a Garden of Eden when European colonizers arrived to take over. But those same European colonizers took over, and they saw fire, and like so much of native wisdom, demonized it and brutally eliminated it from the world. Fire management instead became fire suppression. People would no longer burn the land to care for it, and natural wildfires were put out with extreme prejudice. Fire suppression has become the standard operating procedure across the nation for almost 2 centuries, and the whole country has suffered for it. Especially when combined with climate change, which brings shorter, more brutal winters and longer summers that are hotter and drier, fire ecologies today face a crisis. especially with the wake of fire suppression, things don't burn when they're supposed to, and dangerous conditions arise. We can see these such dangerous conditions in recent times, perhaps nowhere quite so dramatically as Australia in 2020, just before COVID hit, when over 10,000 bushfires would burn over 59 million acres of land across that country in what is now called the Black Summer. The fires would claim over 3,000 buildings, directly and indirectly killing over 400 people, and, according to conservation estimates, also over 3 billion vertebrate animals in Australia within the devastation. 2020 wasn't kind to California either, which had over 9,000 fires itself and burned over 4 million acres, causing billions in property damage and killing several people. Texas isn't free from those wildfires either, and has suffered numerous outbreaks rising in recent years, most notably the Smokehouse Creek fire up in the Panhandle in 2024. The fire burned for weeks from the end of February through the middle of March before it was finally contained. It was the largest wildfire in the U.S. that year, and it burned over 1 million acres and caused over $1 billion in damages. Again, this wouldn't happen naturally. Fire ecologies require regularly occurring fires to burn out overgrowth that chokes wood and scrublands. When the terrain becomes so ill-managed that the entire ecosystem becomes lopsided, fire becomes less creative and more destructive. Without regular fires, native species of plants can't produce new growth, and animal species suffer from malnutrition, eventually having to move on or die out. Without fire, new growth has no clear ground space to take root in, no fresh nutrients baked into the soil, no light filtering in from overgrown canopies. And the diversity of wildlife and flora and fauna, so carefully curated for centuries, gets choked out by dead foliage and invasive weeds. Species that aren't supposed to be here take over little by little, choking out the native plants and driving away animals that can't eat them. Those animals no longer spread native plant seeds, what little there are. And with each turn of the season, the downward spiral of mismanagement becomes a self-fueling cycle of destruction. The dry limbs and leaves pile up through the land like bones in a mass grave, rotting, dry, and brittle, until a single spark, whether careless or intentional, is all it takes to unleash an inferno that will rage unchecked and consuming everything in its path. The onset of fire suppression tactics in America has conversely contributed to the rise of massive, uncontrolled wildfires that burn thousands and millions of acres completely to the ground, instead of simple surface burns that rejuvenate the land instead. With hundreds of lives and millions of dollars in damages that make up just the human toll of these fires. And while the U.S. Wildlife Services do not provide damages to the wildlife in their estimations, I think we can see in what Australia offers that however much harm those fires cause humans, the damage to wildlife is incalculable. Whole ecosystems become unsustainable. Native flora and fauna die out, and entire food chains collapse. All because humans, in their fear of fire's destructive power, fail to see the creation it can also create. The creation and the transformation inherent in spring. because spring is actually an incredibly important time for fire ecologies. And it's an important time for the wise few who have started to leave the mindset of fire suppression behind. Early spring is when most plants are still dormant, and the fallen debris that is so quick to catch is dry from winter. And with the rising temperatures and the humidity still low, this right now, this is fire season. And I don't find any humor in the fact that the National Park Service and various wildlife management divisions across the country are finally relearning the wisdom of native tribes and have, at least in the last few decades, begun a return to prescribed burns for proper land management. But in many places, we're well over a century behind, and restoring natural cycles of fire to a land is incredibly difficult. Again, spring is a critical time of the year for managing fire ecologies. Not only is it the season where fires would naturally burn, but it's also the safest time to do so. The relatively lower temperatures before the high heat of summer, with the promise of spring showers and runoff from winter melt, make spring the safest time of year for controlled burns. The one time when fire is least likely to burn out of control. And since spring is already a time of new growth, the quick return of fresh greenery after a burn help reduce erosion and begin to move the land back into more natural rhythms. But restoring a fire ecology that has been mismanaged for years is not a one-and-done process. Even a single burn is labor-intensive. Conservationists have to go through entire forests with a team, pulling out the dry tinder, breaking off dead limbs, digging out fire breaks, and soaking entire miles ahead of time, so that burns only take one section at a time. Each section can take weeks of work, and all of that work can go up in flames, pun intended, if even the slightest miscalculation or something unaccounted for happens. From an unexpected lightning storm to a cigarette getting flicked out the window. Because our forests and prairies are choking on their own leaf litter and withering from higher temperatures and devastating droughts brought on by climate change, the practices for over 100 years that we have ignored have taken their toll, and setting it to right will take years more. The National Park Service notes that it can take an average of 3 to 5 years of consistent fire management to restore a single ecosystem to its natural order. And that's for the parts that burn most frequently, like the prairies of the Midwest that we find ourselves in here. Those are supposed to burn on their own every 2 to 3 years. Places like California's chaparral or Alaska's boreal forests have a burn cycle of decades, and that takes even longer, consistent planning to put them back to rights. Because fire is not a possibility in nature. It is inevitable. Fire is not a question of if, but when, and then where, and what, and how fiercely. No matter how much humans try to stop it, something is going to burn. No matter how wary humans may be of the element, nature demands that sometimes, quite regularly in fact, we do need to set things on fire. It is all going to burn eventually anyway, and it's better to have some measure of control over it when it does. So this spring, this Ostara, I ask you to take with you the wisdom of fire ecologies. to take with you the wisdom of the land around us. And take a good, long, hard look at the parts of your life that you have left unattended, that have become overgrown, that are choking the energy and vitality away from you and the world that you live in. The parts that are so glutted with dry, lifeless rubble that new things can no longer grow. And to get to work, to pull the broken parts loose, to rake a barrier into the earth beneath your feet, and then let fire do its job. It's a blaze that's long overdue in far too many scenarios. And as we leave here today, blessed by Ostara and the rising of spring that promises the return of light to illuminate our paths and fire to transform our lives, may we carry the wisdom of the season in our hearts and out into the world like torches held aloft, high and bright and burning. Blessed Ostara.
Today's closing words come from Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Her words remind us that for all the hardship, the violence, and the chaos, life will continue to go on. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter. The time has now come to extinguish our chalice. As we do so, let us thank the elements for their gifts and send them on their way. Powers of the north, of the earth, thank you for lending us your stability. Stay if you will, go if you must. Farewell, and blessed be. Powers of the west, of water, thank you for lending us your compassion. Stay if you will, go if you must. Farewell, and blessed be. Powers of the south, of fire, thank you for lending us your determination. Stay if you will, go if you must. Farewell, and blessed be. Farewell, and blessed be. Powers of the east, of air, thank you for lending us your wisdom. Stay if you will, go if you must. Farewell, and blessed be. Farewell, and blessed be. Today, as we extinguish our chalice, continue to let the spirit of spring radiate in your hearts and ignite a fire in your souls. Let its heat encourage you to start anew, take on new challenges, and face your fears. Go out into the world and share your light and goodness with everyone you meet. Blessed be.